If not, probably you have, I'm not sure if you have gotten to this conclusion where, pathology is probably was the easiest part of your exam. Would you agree with that statement?
No.
It was not. And why is that? Why is that? Really? What was
Some of the photos it was
one question that has to be but it was unrelated to the question, so you could have answered the question really. The photo was put to throw you off. I think. Good. Good. So actually the photo that was put was really unrelated to the question. In a way, meaning you could have answered the question without the photo. If you have relied on the photo, it would have. So go ahead.
Pathology is all about picture. To identify them.
Right. So
How
I did not ask you any picture, right? I did not ask you any picture. With the exception of that question, there were no other pictures of the pathology. Yeah, are you complaining? You want pictures?
No. More words.
For final,
Yes.
You will bring pictures unrelated to the.
No. I will not do that. No. So maybe there will be, like usually some of the pictures will be, for example, the flow of. But if you really think about it, first, let me tell you, you have done 50% better than last. Cancer, as you know, is really a devastating disease that has been making the rounds worldwide. At one point in time, between 2005 and 2013 or 14, I recall, it became actually the most common cause of death in the US. Now it is fallen to, but only to second really place following cardiovascular disease. So number two in terms of number of the causes of death in the US, and also number one in many other countries worldwide. So why do you think this is happening? Why is cancer on the rise, in your opinion? Bad habits, I like that. Bad habits die hard, right? This is what I said. What kind of bad habits are we talking about? Right. Okay, have you heard about people actually who smoke, all their lives and they drink all their lives and then, they never really get any kind of disease? You would really like to have some of those genes, right? So what is missing in the equation from that point of view? Genetics. So it is what we call a multifactorial disease, right? It will happen to the person who have what you call it, the right genetic makeup, unfortunately. And what do you mean by genetics? Another question.
Can you make a test to make sure that you have those genes or not?
Sure, there are actually. Now you can sequence your whole genome, your whole genome, in how long? Do you guys know? 3 to 4 hours, or around $1,000. You can do that worldwide. You can do it right here in Riyadh. But I dare you to do it. Why? Because there's a lot of things that will come out that we are not really ready to deal with from the emotional point of view, the ethical point of view. You never know what will come out, right? What it will tell you, like you have this gene and this gene is going to make you predisposed to this disease. What will happen to you? So it is really what you will see is that science and medicine in general is outstripping many parts of the practice of medicine, and the practice of medicine has to catch up to it, especially when it comes to ethics and comes to counseling, for example. What to do if you got to know that that person has this kind of genetic susceptibility or predisposition to certain diseases. That will be devastating for a lot of people. So no, I would rather not do any kind of genetic sequencing. But if in case you want, absolutely, it is worldwide, available and for really a very small price. So so having the genetic susceptibility, but also the vast number of environmental factors that are now wreaking havoc on man, right? Could you give me an example of a genetic susceptibility that will make those environmental factors stick and result in a tumor's formation and cancer development? Go ahead.
Doctor, I forgot the name of the gene, but there's like some kind of enzyme causing the gene that cleans the, what do you call it, the residues of the environment.
Absolutely. So how about what you call DNA repair enzymes, for example? DNA repair enzymes, when they don't, when they are not there, what will happen to that? Then, as a result of, there's always environmental. How many times, do your genes and mine, and like pretty much everybody else, suffer from mutation? Like every what? Every minute, actually, right? So, and how come that there's no cancerous development as a result of that? So there is a repair system that will take care of all of those, right? There is what we call a vigilant repair system. Could you mention actually another repair system other than the DNA repair enzymes that we talked about here? Could you tell me about the genetic mechanism in which the cell will make sure that there is no insult to the genome? The P53, absolutely, the guardian of the genome. How about another one? Retinoblastoma, which is known as the guardian of the cell cycle, right? So both actually of those genes are supervising the whole process of cellular, division and the propagation of of cells in the body, and they will make sure that there is an intact genome. What will happen if there is a damaged genome? What will the P53 do? Exactly, it will take that cell. If you guys recall from the last graph that we did before the midterm, it will take that cell that have a genetic damage and it's going to do what to it? It's going to lead it down the road of apoptosis. Is it the only time actually the P53 will take a cell down the road of apoptosis? Give me another example where the P53, and we did talk about this as well, is going to take a cell down the road of apoptosis or into a decommissioned stage. When the cell becomes old, right? When the cell becomes old, why is that? Because actually when the cell becomes old, then this telomere that the P53 will recognize as a very shortened telomere is going to be actually the time when that cell is going to be led down the road of apoptosis, or actually what you call it, senescence. That is a decommissioned state, a non-replicative state. Now, why is a cell that is old is going to be led down the road of apoptosis? What's the reason for that? What's the presumption behind that? The presumption behind that is that that cell has actually suffered enough genetic damage as a result of of its life long course that is going to make it not fit for further replication. That's really the presumption underlying the fact that all cells are going to be led down the road of apoptosis. So eventually, you have a system that is there that is vigilant to ensure the intactness of the genetic material. But if that system itself is mutated, so what will happen if you have a mutation of the P53, for example? You have cancers where? Everywhere in the body, exactly. What do you call that syndrome? The Li-Fraumeni syndrome, right? So you will see that the person or the family is used because it is a genetic, because it's a genetic mutation in the germline. The whole family is going to be suffering actually from all different types of tumors. That used to be a question of the USMLE. All right, so in this case, you will see that the P53 is going to. How about if there is a genetic mutation in the retinoblastoma gene, what would happen? Cancers. Cancers where? In the retina, in the form of retinoblastoma tumor, right? Is there any other gene? Is there any other tumors that are associated with retinoblastoma mutation? Retinoblastoma gene mutation? Yes, absolutely. That's going to be osteosarcoma and also breast cancer. Okay. All right. So now, actually, here's one more question for you. Now we talked about the fact that those patients are being born with the case of the P53 with a genetic mutation, right? A germline genetic mutation that's going to result in really the whole works when it comes to tumor development in the family. Now, is that the most common form of the disease, or is it the rare form of cancer? When you have a genetic a congenital kind of mutation that is going to result in tumorous formation. Is that a common or is it a rare form of the disease? That's a very rare form of the disease. The most common form of the disease is something that is happening as a result of the interplay of genetics and environment. Okay? So there is no really what you call a genetic driver that is taking care of the whole business. When it comes to P53 mutation, that's all you need for a tumorous development. But for the majority, the vast majority of tumors, it's going to have, like what you call a partial kind of genetic insult, in addition to the environmental factor. The combination of the two will make likely, development of a tumor. All right, so now when you are dealing with a problem, with a cancer problem, you're not dealing with a single problem. You're dealing with multiple factors at the same time. So let's talk about let's talk about acute myelogenous leukemia that is going to arise from a chronic myeloid leukemia. It's what do you call it? An acute disease that will emanate from a background of a chronic disease. What's going to happen is that the acute disease that that developed most recently is going to carry its own mutation and is going to carry the mutations of the old disease itself. So in that case, when you try to actually deal with it as a medical community or a scientific community, you're dealing with so many genetic malformations that it's going to be almost impossible to tackle. So, and the same exact thing happens not just in this case, but in any case. Let's say that someone actually developed as a result of smoking mutations in his bronchial epithelium that resulted eventually in bronchogenic carcinoma. Okay, once that cell becomes dysplastic, once it becomes cancerous, the genetic material, and it has acquired actually the genetic mutation that resulted in it becoming cancerous, the genetic mutation becomes so fragile that it's going to be very open, very susceptible for further mutations. Okay, so one mutation is going to result in many different genetic insults that is going to compound the problem and makes it very unlikely to be solved. All right, so let's talk about, for example, thyroid cancer. Thyroid cancer is one disease affecting the thyroid, but it has different subcategories. For example, it has papillary thyroid cancer. Now, papillary thyroid cancer, you would think that it is a single disease. That's not really the case. Papillary thyroid cancer could result from several different types of genetic mutations, okay, that may result in the same tumor getting formed at the end. So again, it is not a single disease, and you cannot treat it with one size fits all. As a result of that, nowadays you have what is known as tailored or personalized therapy. We know that when it comes to cancer treatment and cancer management, there is no such thing as one size fits all. Rather, you have to actually look at each patient very, very differently. That's one. Two, we know that, for example, what works for one patient, the medication that works for one patient is not going to be working for the second patient. Example of that, CML. CML you treated with imatinib, with the Gleevec treatment. Gleevec, in some patients, the patient will get this treatment and they are going to have a very incredible response and cure from the disease, what they call molecular kind remission. So that even the translocation is going to go away. It's going to go away. Now, on the other hand, there are patients who will give them imatinib and nothing happens. So what's making the disease different? Again, if you really think about it like this, the same translocation that happened in both patients that resulted in the CML may have resulted in one patient in further genetic mutations that will make that disease resistant to the treatment that you're giving them, and whereas the second patient is still not have developed anything else other than the translocation. When you give them the treatment, they are going to respond to that. It may be actually that the genetic drive is very different between the two patients resulting in the same result. We know that there are different ways of reaching the same disease, and there is a long list of genetic insults and also epigenetic factors that may result in tumorous development. So again, that's a call actually for treating the cancer patient as a very unique patient. Even if two patients carry the same tumor, that may not mean that they are going to respond to the same management. The best method of dealing with cancer, why are you learning about cancer? You're learning about cancer because this is the best way of figuring out what's the underlying etiology, what's the underlying pathology mechanism, that have resulted in the tumor in the first place. Now, for a lot of people, they will tell you when it comes to genetics, our hands are off. There is really nothing you can do. Is this the case now? Could we do something about genetic disease nowadays? What could we do? You guys probably are far better than any older pathologist when it comes to that. What is on the market now that you can do to genetic diseases
Genetic
that
reengineering.
we were not able to do probably 10 years ago? One word.
Re-engineering.
Huh?
Genetic remodeling.
Genetic remodeling. Using what? CRISPR. Excellent. So the CRISPR, as an example of many other techniques that are on the market, the CRISPR technology is really opening doors that were closed for a long time. So this is going to help you modulate, the genetic message, really, the genetic makeup of the individual. They started doing it. Have you heard about any kind of cure of treatment of cancer treatment? How about, have you heard a cure of a cancer patient as a result of the use of CRISPRs very recently, this summer? Have you guys? So if you check it out, I believe it was retinoblastoma patients who were treated with CRISPR, and they were actually cured as a result of using that technique. So CRISPR and the new kind of techniques that depend on it, and also parallel techniques to CRISPR, are actually going and making the rounds. Now, for you to use CRISPR, you need to know what is the problem in the first place, right? This is why you're learning about the genetic makeup and how it results in pathogenesis of different tumors in this series. Now, what's going to happen actually is that even though, as I mentioned to you, the majority of cancer cases are going to be due to the interplay of genetics and environment, but the disease itself is a heritable disease. And the reason why it is a heritable disease is the fact that actually once this cell acquires actually this genetic mutation, it's going to pass it from mother cell to offsprings. That makes it a heritable disease. And because it is a heritable disease, Darwinian selection is going to be applied on those offsprings. So right off the bat that not all the cells are going actually to survive the process. Now let's step back a little bit, before that. I mentioned to you that all of us actually suffer mutations and a constant rate, right? And all those mutations are being taken care of by the repair mechanisms that we have. All right, so now the fact that you have that number of cases, the second most common cause of death in a nation like the US, so you have incredible amount of cases that are coming on the forefront. The fact that you have that many cases of cancer, and knowing that the majority of mutation, how about this? Here's a question for you, you will answer this for me. Will all the mutations that happen result in cancer?
No.
Is it the majority of the mutation
No.
that happens will result in cancer?
No.
Only a tiny number of mutation that happens, will result in cancer. What happened in the majority of cases when there are mutations that affect the cell?
Sinus mutations.
What will happen to that cell? The cell will die, exactly. Only one way. The cell will die because there is no way to bypass that point of mutation that happened to the genetic material of those cells. So what does that make you conclude from the statement? You have a lot of number of cases. You have a lot of a lot of times these mutations will not happen, will not result in a tumorous formation, okay? And the fact that actually you have incredible number of cases that are coming onto the forefront. What does that make you conclude? It should make you conclude that there are incredible amount of genetic damage that is happening. So that is translated into this vast number of new cases of cancer. Okay? So you have a lot of damage. You have a lot of environmental factors that are making the rounds, if you will, going around and causing this genetic damage. How is the genetic damage happening in cancer most commonly, in your opinion? 2 words. It's a DNA damage, but as a result of what?
Radiation.
Radiation, chemicals, right?
Environmental.
carcinogens? Is there like, but I'm asking, like also go beneath that, right? Pathology, there's no bottom for pathology. The deeper you go, the deeper you get.
Diamonds?
What is
Diamonds.
diamonds?
Diamonds. Diamonds.
Thymus.
Diamond.
Dimers. Dimers.
Cross-linking.
Free radicals. So at the end of the day, it comes down to the free radical damage, really. This is what, how all the environmental factors are going eventually. Let's say, not say all, because then you would be wrong, right? The vast majority of environmental factor will, mediate their damage on the genetic material through the free radical formation, and then the free radical will take care of the genetic material. All right, so Darwinian selection, survival of the fittest cell. So those offsprings that now have carried, so even though the disease itself was not heritable to start with, right? Because it was acquired. It was acquired as a result of the interplay between the genetics and the environment of that person. But the disease itself, but the cancer cell itself is going now to pass this genetic mutation from one generation to the rest. That will make the disease itself a heritable disease. Now the question is, what will happen to those cells? Not all those cells are going to survive. Only the toughest one among them are going to survive. Why is it the case? Why do you need the toughest cell to survive? Well, like if you go to New York, you will know what I mean. I went to New York, I felt like a midget really. I felt so short because everybody in the city is incredibly tall, and they are incredibly muscular, and everything else incredible really. You feel that there has been a selection that has applied, to the inhabitants of this, what you call it, urban jungle. And that applies to cancer cells as well. Only the toughest cells are going to be surviving. So in a way, actually, you will see that the immune system is trying to rid the body out of this tumor, but at the same time, it is, in a way, actually, coming back at the body and really harming the body. Why? Because it is ensuring that only the toughest of the toughest are going to, live at the end of that day. It will make sure that the cells that are going to be, susceptible to the immune system will be weeded out and killed. It will make sure that those cells that need a lot of nutrients and a lot of blood supply also are going to be weeded out and destroyed. So what will happen, and then those cells that are going to actually be susceptible to apoptosis will be weeded out and destroyed. So the end result is going to be the retainment, if you will. Only the cells that are able to outlive, outmaneuver, outdo, if you will, all the defense mechanisms of the body are going to live through that day, and they are going to survive to form this tumor mass. This is why, at the end of the day, you will see that the tumor cell is going to be, what you call a cell from hell, really, a concoction from hell. Why? Because it's able to live without any kind of outside, outside signal. It does not need any hormonal signal to grow, and a hormonal signal that will not make it stop growing. Why? Because the driver of the growth comes from the cell itself. The driver in that case is going to be the genetic mutation itself. Example of that, what you see, for example, in CML. Why does CML happen? Because the translocation that happens that will result in the Philadelphia chromosome on chromosome 22 is going to result in a fusion gene, fusion oncogene, known as the BCR-ABL, that will have a tyrosine kinase activity that is going to put the cell in a hyperdrive for division. So the cell will divide and divide and divide. That's the definition of a tumor cell, right? Does it need any hormone from the outside? Does it need any growth factor from the outside? Absolutely not. It marches to its own tune, very independent. It does not really need any kind of help from anything else. This is what you wish, that all humans are, right, in a way? But that does not happen always. Evasion of apoptosis and immortality. We know that, the cell has what you call a lifetime. It should not exceed that lifetime. And that lifetime is going to be ensured by the length of the telomere. Because the minute that this telomere becomes, shortened, progressively, that's when the p53 is going to reorganize that the telomere have become a shortened, double-stranded, DNA fragment of DNA, and that is going to actually, activate the p53 to take the cell, down the road of apoptosis or senescence. Now, what does the tumor cell do? The tumor cell is going to be very creative in the way that is going to actually upregulate its, telomere, or try to evade apoptosis in so many different ways. For example, we know that tumor cells are going actually to upregulate those genes in the BCL2 family of genes that we talked about before the midterm, that are going to oppose apoptosis, okay? And is going to suppress those genes that are favoring apoptosis in a way actually that is going to ensure the survivability of the cell. For example, cancer cells will ensure to increase the intactness of the mitochondrial membrane, so that cytochrome C is not going to be released into the cytosol, kickstarting the process of apoptosis. Cancer cells will ensure that, as a result, if it's a rapidly dividing tumor that is actually resulting in rapid, shortening of the telomere, the cancer cell is going to ensure actually that, the telomere is adding actually more DNA elements to it to ensure its length, to make sure that it is long enough not to be recognized by the p53. As a result of that, apoptosis will not happen. So many different mechanisms in which a cancer cell is going to rely on to ensure that apoptosis will not happen to it. Neoangiogenesis. The cancer cell does not need to depend on the vicinity, on the ECM, for its blood supply. It has everything that it needs in order to build its own network of blood supply, from the VEGF and the hypoxia-induced factor alpha-1 that is going to be upregulated, that will ensure actually that this cancer cell is going to build its own blood supply. It will bring in endothelial cells, it will bring in stromal cells, and it will build its own new vessels, and that is going to result in its independence from reliance of its blood supply from the vicinity, from the ECM. Aberrant metabolism, for a normal cell, the normal cell is going to rely on the oxidative phosphorylation for its energy, needs. What happened in a cancer cell is that this cancer cell has really damaged, components. It may have damaged mitochondria, it may have damaged nucleus, it may have damaged cytoplasm, and for the oxidative phosphorylation to happen, this will not be possible, because oxidative phosphorylation will actually require an intact mitochondria, an intact nucleus, an intact cytoplasm, and that's not really available for the cancer cell. Another thing, actually, the cancer cell cannot wait for the oxidative phosphorylation to happen. Why? Because it divides faster than a normal cell. It has to actually provide numbers, and for it to rely on the oxidative phosphorylation, that's going to take forever. So in this case, it is going to go back in time and remember what it used to do during embryologic life. And that what used to be known as the Warburg mechanism, or the Warburg effect, where it used to rely on breaking down glycogen. And the result of that is going to be what? A meager 2 molecules of ATP, as opposed to the 30 plus molecules of ATP that you get from oxidative phosphorylation. So you would ask yourself, why is the cancer cell doing this? Because that is all that it needs actually in order to divide and create that tumor mass. The goal of that tumor cell is simply to divide. It does not care about functional specification. It does not care about the beautification that happen to the cell after it divides. Simply there in order to give numbers, and that is going to be attained by having these 2 molecules of ATP. So it regresses back in time and depends on a mechanism that is used by embryologic cells, that was used probably by that cancer cell during embryologic phase. Evasion of the immune system surveillance, that in itself actually is a class act, because the cancer cell may use the immune cell itself against itself. One of the ways it does that actually is simply by hiding itself within immune cells. For example, when the tumor emboli reaches the blood, you will see that it's going to cover itself by blood cells. So when the T cells actually see this tumor embolus, they will not recognize it. Why? Because it is shielded by a number of blood cells on the periphery. That's one way for it to do. Another actually mechanism for the tumor to ensure that the immune system is dysfunctional is by inciting an autoimmune response. A lot of tumors result in an autoimmune disorders at the same time. For example, we know that CLL/SLL is associated with an autoimmune disorder as well that may result in autoimmune hemolytic anemia. So by doing this, what do you think is the cell doing? What is the tumor cell doing by inciting an autoimmune response?
The immune system goes somewhere else.
Exactly. It is getting the immune system busy with something else. Throwing off the immune system away from itself, away from the cancer cell itself. How about that? As an act of genius, really, when it comes to cancer cell specifications. Right. So at the end of the day, you will see that the tumor cell that will survive, that will make it at the end of the day, is going to be a tumor cell that is going to have one or more of those abilities, or actually have what you call a potpourri, a touch of each one of them. All of them will be self-sufficient. All of them will be independent. Some of them will be invading apoptosis. In this case, it will result actually in a tumor known as a low-grade tumor. Not all tumors will invade apoptosis, because if it's a rapidly dividing tumor, it does not really care about that. It's providing number regardless actually if apoptosis is happening or not. Why? Because it's dividing and dividing and dividing. This is what it's doing. But there is the other set of tumors that is a low-grade tumor, where the tumor is dividing at a much lower pace, if you will, resulting in the formation of a tumor mass. So not all the cells. Immortality the same way. Neoangiogenesis, probably all tumor cells will carry a degree of neoangiogenesis. Aberrant metabolism, again, the same exact thing right here. Invasion of the immune system, that's really different between tumor cells. Between tumors, as a result of that, you will see that the tumor cells, of different tumors have, different abilities to invade and to kill. For example, we know that, a thyroid cancer will be far less, in general, if you really think about it, will be far less deadly than, for example, a choriocarcinoma. Choriocarcinoma does not really need to reach a large size to kill. It will metastasize when it's still like 1 or 2 centimeter, large, and it will give rise to metastasis, widespread metastasis to the lungs and everywhere else. They kill the patient, and during autopsy, for example, we look for the primary tumor. There's no really way to find out where the primary tumor. It's a germline tumor that could be present anywhere, really. And the result is you may miss it, but it was able to, in this case, evade the immune system far better than the papillary, carcinoma or the thyroid carcinoma in general. So, different abilities and different, different acquirement of those, different, criteria of a tumor cell will give the tumor cell its own personality when it comes to being able to invade and destroy. Nomenclature and some of the basic, elements about cancer. Who's going to read this for us?
A 40-year-old woman presented with
Complaint of
complete
of a mass
in her left breast. Physical examination revealed a mass in the left breast. A single palpable axillary lymph node was also found. Mammography confirmed the presence of a mass 2.5 centimeter in diameter.
Okay, thank you. All right, so here's the mass right here, as you can see here. What is this speckled thing here? Speckled things. You see these dots?
Yeah.
What are these?
White blood cells.
Not necrosis. No? You won't see that. Unless, of course, you're a molecular pathologist, and then you can see the LC, right? This is an SI joke.
Scar tissue?
Huh?
Scar tissue?
Scar tissue, not scar tissue.
What?
Calcifications,
Oh.
microcalcification, absolutely. That's actually could be an indication of a cancer, right? So you are able to do it, and this is why you do mammography, by the way, because you're looking for the microcalcification that may lead you actually to look for a tumor mass. So in this case, actually you have microcalcification. You have done what you call a Halsted maneuver. The Halsted or Halsted operation, that's modified radical mastectomy. You take out the breast, and you take also the axillary tail with it, and during dissection of the axillary tail, they found out that there is a lymph node that is enlarged in this case. In your opinion, what is the most solid criteria that will tell you that what you are dealing with here is actually a malignant tumor? What is it? So this is the mass right here. Okay? This is the lymph node. What is the gold standard in this case? No. But that's one of the criteria for sure, but it is not the gold standard. The gold standard, if you have this, this is a metastatic lymph node, metastatic tumor to the lymph node. That is, once you have that, there is no other way that you can call this tumor except a malignant tumor. Okay? So one of the gold criteria for malignancy is the presence of metastasis, as you can see here. So with this one, right off the bat, you can call that actually breast cancer. But you're absolutely right. One of the criteria to call it, malignant tumor as opposed to a benign tumor is the fact that it is actually, irregular border. Now, where does this irregularity come from? The irregularity of this mass comes from the fact that this, tumor cells have the ability to invade nearby tissue, and by sending, those tongues of tissue, sheets of tissue, into nearby tissue, they will create this irregular kind of papillary, so what I'm talking about, papillary kind, irregular zigzagging kind of border. Now, is that going to make it easy for you to come in as a surgeon and shell this tumor mass out? No. So the irregular border will make it very likely that instead actually of going and trying to take only the tumor mass, you have to take the whole breast out, okay? Because of the fact that it has a regular border, and what you need is, you want to ensure what you call a clean margin of resection, or a free margin of resection from the tumor. Now, one of the things that you are going to do is going to be the fact, that one of the criteria of malignancy also is the fact that this, tumor mass is invading the fat, as you can see here, invading nearby tissue. You can see the encroachment, right? So all of this are indication that what you are dealing with is also malignant. One of the features of malignancy in breast cancer will be invasion of the fat. Another feature of malignancy is the fact that this tumor mass is a larger tumor mass. What do you think will happen if this was a benign tumor? How big of a size will it be? Will it be as big as this?
No.
This is at least probably 8 centimeters in maximum diameter.
It will be less.
It will be much less, and the reason, you're absolutely right. So the benign tumor, regardless of how aggressive it is, it will be far less than that of a malignant tumor. The reason for this is that the driver of the benign tumor, the genetic driver of the benign tumor, is a much more simpler than the complex mutation that you see in malignant tumors. So that's going to be translated in two things. One, the ability to grow, and that's going to be limited. That's number one. And number two, the ability to invade, and that's also going to be limited very much. So as a result of that, a benign tumor is going to grow not as actually infiltrating border, but as actually a result of pushing border. So it will invade in a pushing way rather than infiltrating way. Why? Because the tumors don't have the ability to invade nearby tissue and infiltrate nearby tissue.
Are we going to see a change in the color of the mass itself?
No, it does not necessarily mean anything actually at this stage. It may actually be when it becomes really large, much larger than this. For example, like if you are dealing with a leiomyosarcoma, for example, in the uterus, usually the tumor mass are really large, and as a result of that, you may see actually once it becomes really large, much larger than this, you will see that there are areas of the tumor that's going to become necrotic because it will be ischemic, because of the fact that the tumor cells are going to grow faster than the growth of the blood network that is supplying it. So areas within the tumor will be necrotic. That's when you start to see changes of color.
Doctor, isn't the breast is composed of fat maybe? So what is
The breast is fat, is stroma, and are glandular elements, right? And you will see that in the next slide. Okay. All right. So in general, these are features of malignancy. Now, what else actually is a feature of malignancy? You can see that the nipple is retracted, is pushed downward. That's another sign actually of malignancy. And the way that for that to happen is that the tumor cells are going to invade the lymphatics, and then they are going to resolve and it's in pulling it down actually towards the tumor mass, resulting in retraction of the nipple, as you can see here. All right, so all of those that we mentioned are the criteria of malignancy, but the gold standard, criteria, that what you call it, where the money is going to be the fact that you have metastatic tumor to the lymph node. Once you have that, that is a malignant tumor. Whatever else, is missing, it doesn't really matter. All you care about is the metastasis. Now, that's in 99, like, in medicine, you can never be like so actually, rock solid, right? There's always, this is in 99.999% of the times that it will be malignant tumors metastasizing to lymph nodes, or invading and metastasizing to distant spaces. So the question will be, do benign tumors metastasize? Yes, they may. In a 0.000000001, you may see benign tumors that metastasize. Example of that, leiomyoma. There's a subset known as metastasizing leiomyoma, a benign tumor that actually finds its way. But it's an incredibly rare, and you cannot depend on it to explain pathophysiology. So once you see metastasis, are we done?
Keep on going.
Really?
Yeah.